I hope that you'll enjoy this project as much as the 150 builders who already have built desks. And you should know that the desks have gone to over 220 young people who really appreciate them and are so happy to have a home base to study and learn, especially in this time of home-based learning. Hi there, my name is Barry Glass, and I'm the founder and president of Volunteer Ventures Massachusetts. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to introduce you to the parts of the Deskmate's kit. We produce kits with all the pieces and all the accessories for you to build a Deskmate's desk. And after we introduce you to the pieces, we'll build a desk together. What you'll get is one bag like this or some other bag that's got all the parts in it, all the wooden parts in it. And they're pre-cut, they're pre-measured, and many of the pieces have marks on them so that you can lay them out in a consistent way. And so you don't need to measure, cut, or purchase any materials to build the Deskmate's desk out of this kit. In your kit, you will have a top and a bottom that are the same size, and as you can see, this is also countersunk, and the top piece has some kind of a marking, whether it's a dot like this or top written on it. You've got two sides. Red is marked for the right and blue is the left. These also have X's marked on the side of the boards, and that's where you will place your legs. So here's the sides here. The X's are on the piece here, and the legs get applied over the X's. Here's a back piece, also with countersunk holes. There are 4 legs, two of each type, 2 side stretchers to go on the inside of the construction, and then 1 straight cut back stretcher that sits on top of the side stretcher. That provides for a very strong construction, and the angle of the legs makes it more difficult to tip. The other part of the Deskmate's kit is typically in a brown paper bag, and in here are the screws, 2 different sizes. The gold ones are 1.5 inches and the silver ones are 1.25 inches long. There will be a pilot bit for you to drill the holes to insert the screws, and there's also a driver bit, a number 2 driver bit that will help you to drive the screws in through the pieces of wood. Wood glue and a brush, because the glue is actually what keeps the wood strong. It's actually stronger than the screws. You'll have a brush for painting or finishing, a stir stick, and some finish. Also in the kit is sandpaper. Some 100 grit sandpaper and some 200 grit sandpaper. You can tell the difference because the numbers are typically written on the back of the pieces. It's really helpful to have 2 power drills available, 1 to drill the pilot hole and then 1 to drive the screws. But if you don't, you can take the bit out and then you can insert the number 2 bit. Having a power sander is really, really, really useful and helpful to get all the surfaces, to round all the corners, to prepare the wood to accept the finish. A sanding block is helpful to have in case you need to get into tough places with the sandpaper. Here's the aforementioned glue water container to keep your glue brush from drying out. And it's really, really helpful to have a clamp or 2 on hand. This opening is less than 6 inches, so if you have a clamp that opens to 6 inches, that will work as well. Make sure you have a damp rag and some water to clear out after you wipe the extra glue that comes off your surface. You want to keep that fresh, so make sure you have some water to redampen and clean out your glue rag. Okay, and here's the moment we've all been waiting for, the actual construction of the desk. So I've got my top and my bottom. I'm going to put my bottom away for the moment. Use my top, which has got the countersunk holes on the outside and the dot designating that it is the top. And I've got my 2 sides. X's need to be on the outside of the box, and the arrows designate that it's the front of the side piece. And you'll note that the front of the top and bottom also don't have any holes drilled because there aren't any screws going into the front. I get my pieces lined up. Gluing the piece before you clamp and screw together, you got to remember that because it's harder to take it apart. I take my glue and I run a bead down the whole surface of the side, and you butter it on like you're putting butter or cream cheese on toast. You want to cover the entire surface, but you don't want it to be really, really thick. I'm going to do the other side. Glue the whole way down. Butter it up nicely. There we are. And glue in my little handy water can. Lining up one side and then the other side. And I'll use clamps to hold it together. But a very important part of building the box is making sure that the front edges are flush. And flush means that they are flat. I'm going to clamp this together. Good, and that holds it in place. And also the side of the desk panel is also flush and flat with the top piece. I'm going to take my drill with the pilot bit in it and go in about an inch. And then I'm going to put in the screws, making sure that the head of the screw goes down below the surface, not way down into the wood, but just beneath the surface so you don't catch yourself on it. Here's 1, 2, and 3. So now you may also see some of the glue squeezing out. That's a good thing. And if you've got enough squeeze out, you take your dust rag or your glue rag, give it a wipe. You might also give a look and make sure that the surfaces are touching. You don't want there to be any gaps because this kind of glue does not fill gaps. Going to the other side, keeping the front edge and the side pieces flush. Pilot hole number 1, number 2, number 3 on the side. And make sure you've got your gold screws. The gold ones are for the top and the bottom. The silver ones are for the legs and the braces on the side. 1, 2. Make sure that your screws sync up tight and that the bottom, again, that the surfaces touch each other. You might need to give the screws a little extra oomph, and when you hear that rrr sound, that means that the screws made good contact. Wiping off the excess glue. Now the back piece again has a couple of countersunk holes to go into the side pieces. It's nice and flush with the outside. It's straight on the back and flush with the piece on the other side as well. I got to remember to butter up the surface. Oh good, my brush is nice and flexible. This piece of plywood seems a little porous. It's got a lot of holes in the surface here, so I'm going to add a little more glue just to make sure it takes. I'm going to put it in place. Flush with the side, flush with the back. Okay, so this is now clamped to the bench. It's holding it in place nicely. I'm going to drill my pilot holes first. And putting in the 4 screws in the back here. I've got a little bit of squeeze out on the back here. That's where I put the extra glue. I'm going to do a little bit of quality control before I flip it over and do the bottom piece. I'm going to make sure the screws are beneath the surface so that you don't catch yourself on it. We have countersunk holes in the back to screw into the side pieces. We've got the holes drilled. Pilot. Pilot. Now the bottom piece. Again, countersink holes on the outside. I'm going to give a fit and have a look and give it a fit. I'm not going to have a fit. I'm going to take a look and see, make sure it sits well. I'm going to butter up all the surfaces and do the bottom piece all at once. If you prefer, with the box open, you could put a coat of polyurethane or paint, whatever you're using, on the inside of the box because it's hard to get to once it's together. This is what I did. I took a regular paintbrush, taped it to a paint stir stick, so when I don't need to put the polyurethane on now or the paint on now, I can do it once the desk is constructed. I also forgot that there's some glue sticking out here, and this is the time to get rid of it. It's my favorite part, which is the buttering. A nice even coat all around. I'm going to fasten the back first, but it doesn't matter if you do the back or the sides first, as long as that front is nice and flush. It could be that at some point the wood warps a little bit, so I'm going to leave the sides unclamped for the moment. The 1.5 inch long screws are the ones for the top and the bottom. We're lucky that this particular brand has both gold and silver. Most screws are all the same. I'm going to give this a wipe. Okay, and this edge is pretty flush. It's flush in the front and very even along the sides. So I'm going to clamp it up. Ooh, a lot of squeeze out on this one. That's your squeeze out, and that's just too much. That'll harden and it'll clump up. Okay, again a little wipe of that squeeze out. This side is flush with the front and the sides are quite even, so we're going to clamp it up and screw it in place as it is. Pilot. Pilot. Quality control. That screw head's sticking up a little bit. And that is the first part of your desk construction. We call it the box. Now this box is made entirely of plywood. Because of the pandemic and supply line challenges and price increases, you may get a box that's of different materials. Like this one. This is got an what's called an MDF top and bottom. But regardless of the materials, the construction process is the same. So don't fret if you get a different material. We have now 3 different size desks. We started out with a 26-inch for young kids, and then we got calls for taller desks from middle schoolers, high schoolers, and so they needed a taller desk. So now we have desks that are also 30 inches high for bigger people, and we also have a desk that's 6 inches wider than these 24-inch desks. We have a 30-inch desk as well. So if people inquire about what kind of desks and size the Deskmates make, we now have 3 different sizes. Now that we've got the box constructed, we're going to go to the legs and the leg assembly using the braces and the sides and the back. Using 1¼ silver screws, those screws will not penetrate through the other pieces of wood and create a safety hazard. To put the leg on, line it up right at the pencil mark, right over the X, and that's where it's going to go. You could use a human clamp here as well. First, our trusty glue, buttering the back of the wood. I'm going to stop buttering at the bottom of the pilot holes. So I'm going to butter from the top all over there, but stop roughly in that area. The glue will make contact with this whole side piece. It's on the line, flush with the top. I'm going to drill a pilot hole, and I'm going to put one screw in just because it'll make it easier to let go and to adjust the piece if need be. I got my 2 hands free. With the other pilot hole, I have these 1¼ screws designed so that they can go just a little bit beneath the surface of the leg, and that way it will not go through to the inside of the box. If you drive them too deep, they'll go into the desk box. Leg 2 for this side. It's flush and right on the line, making sure that you're over the X. If you put too much glue on, it'll swoosh around a little bit. So try to find that fine line between enough glue and not too much. Again, it's nice and lined up here. I'm going to do one hole. It's really important to keep the leg aligned with the line, because if it's off a little bit, then the braces beneath may not fit as well. 3 more pilot holes. Those are in. I've got a little bit of glue squeeze out, so I'm going to get my rag and wipe it clean. Okay, and that's one side of the legs. I'm going to flip it over. I always like to check to make sure I got the right parts and they're going to fit right before I put any glue on anything. Here's the front leg, the correct angle over the X, and the rear leg, the correct angle over the X. All right, so I'm going to butter this one up. I like to get the water out of the brush bristles, because if it's too watery, then the glue runs and it isn't as effective. Okay, that's just right along the line, and it's flush with the top. So let's go ahead and do the other 3 holes. And now the second leg. Yep, it's a good fit. Okay, it's flush and along the line. It stayed in place. I had a little bit of squeeze out there. I'll get that later. Clean up the squeeze out. I'm going to make sure that none of the screws have come in through the box into the inside, and none have come through. Now we're going to put the side angle braces on, and these are cut at angles to match the legs. Important to note that these go on the inside of the legs, not the outside, because then the back stretcher won't fit and it won't be as solid a construction. So we've designed these to go on the inside of the legs. The way to line these up and to start off is that Because it's an angled cut, you'll be able to flush out the front. And you've got the front of the box there and the front of the leg here. Start this assembly with putting the angle brace here flush with the front leg. And you might need to make a pencil mark with an X to let yourself know where that is. And the reason why we haven't laid these out specifically is because, again, when you put the legs on at the top, if it's off just a fraction of an inch, it translates into something different down below here. So when you do put these angle braces on, make sure that the front is flush, and we'll go with that. The back stretcher will cover the back piece if it's uneven. So same process of gluing. Go there, look here. I'm going to put that on right up to the line. Now you can see that move a little bit. It might have been a little bit too much glue, but I'm going to put this side on first. You may not have to drill your pilot holes as deeply, and you don't have to use as much force with the driver to put screws into number 2 white pine. Give a check for squeeze out. Before you flip it over, you might give it a quality control check to make sure that the screws haven't come through. Flip it over. And do the next one. And this is where there may be a bit of a fudge factor in putting this brace on. This fits quite nicely here. At this point, it's flush with the front, or flush with the front here, and flush with the back here. What we want to make sure is that this leg, this brace, and this brace are not at really terribly different heights. So I'm going to just give a look where this is flush. Say, okay, that's 3 inches. That's a little more than 3. That's 3. And that's a little bit over 3. We're pretty close to putting this on and keeping the pieces flush. So I'm going to make a mark. I'm going to put an X where the piece goes and butter it up. Don't wear really fancy clothes and then put your brush and then take your brush off like I've been doing. Wear your best paint smock. I'm going to fasten the front first. Keep it nice and flush. Okay, it's pretty good back here. Only off just by a hair, but that's good enough. And just to give myself a little check on the height of this bracket, it's 3 inches to the bottom there, and about 3 inches. That's pretty close. That's very good. Your back brace, that's the last piece in the construction. You have 2 choices here. You can put it flush with the back piece or flush with the leg as well. I'm going to go flush with the back of the leg here. After getting some feedback from builders, we decided that we would countersink these holes at an angle, because when we did them straight, it was difficult to get your drill in at the right angle. So these are all pre-drilled at an angle. Okay, I'm going to butter up the top of this side brace. Also using 1 1/4" screws for this. So don't worry if this piece is a little bit long and won't fit in the leg where it is, because you can flex this in, give or take, in order to make that piece work. But you do want it to fit right up against the leg. And that tightened up right nicely against the leg. Excellent. On the sides and also underneath. And there, that's the last step in constructing this desk. This is a desk that's fully constructed. The legs, the braces, the box assembly, and now you're ready to sand and finish the desk. Now that we've done the construction, we've come to what I think is the most important part of the desk process is the sanding, because these desks are going to young people. We don't want them to get splinters. We don't want them to get caught on screws that have come through. We want to round off the edges so that it's a nice smooth surface. They won't cut or catch themselves on it. So take your time. The whole project will finish up nicely. We've given you, as I said earlier, two types of sandpaper. The 100 grit or 120 grit, if we gave that to you, that's what you would use to sand the wood, sand all the edges, flush things off if they need to be flushed. You want to use your rougher grit sandpaper to prepare the surface of the wood. I'm not going to sand, but you want to run all the edges. And this is how you round the corners, is by sanding with this kind of motion here. And that's important because if you don't round off the edges, you can get splinters or you can cut yourself on it. So be methodical about perhaps doing the front and then the top and then the side and the back, or you can flip it over and do it that way as well. But be methodical about your sanding so that you get all of the surfaces nicely smooth and rounded, including the edges of the legs, the edges of the braces, and inside, and also the flat surfaces as well. Make sure you sand all of the surfaces. If you don't have a power sander, you can try using a sanding block. This one has a bit of foam on the end, and it's just out of a piece of wood. You can sand this way, do the same motions, and get every piece as well, or every surface as well. But the sander will help you get a better sanded surface, and it'll go much faster for you as well. It's a good thing to wear a mask when you're sanding so you don't inhale the sawdust. Before you put the finish on, whether it's paint or polyurethane, this is a time to correct mistakes, to scrape off extra glue if some got away from you and you didn't get a chance to wipe it off with your glue rag. So this is a time to inspect it, make sure that all your screws are set below the surface, and it's a time for quality control before you sand. Here we are now at the final step of finishing the desk. You've done all your sanding, you've scraped off the glue, and the wood's prepared and ready to accept the finish. Ideally, we like to have 3 coats of finish, at least 3 coats on the top, because that's the surface that's going to get a lot of use. Whether it's polyurethane or a paint color, minimum of 2 coats, and hopefully a 3rd on the top part. Plan your time out so that there'll be adequate time to dry between coats. Read the directions on whatever product you have so that you get the right information about how long you need to wait between coats. If the desk here is upside down, I like to start with getting the bottom done, and it's important to do the bottom to make sure it's sealed. It's a little bit easier for me to get the bottom here and these parts as well. So I recommend that you start with the desk upside down, do everything that you can paint, leaving some room for you to flip it or some way to flip it without getting your hands all painty, and then flip it over and finish it from the top. When you finish the desk, give it a good thorough look and wipe up any of the drips that are happening. Once you've got the first coat of either paint or polyurethane on the desk, you have to be prepared for the second coat. If you're using solid color paint, you do not need to sand between coats. But if you are using a clear polyurethane, you do need to sand between coats because the wood has gotten a little bit roughed up, the grain is raised, and sanding it creates a better mechanical bond between the two coats. So I recommend you do the sanding between coats with the 220 paper and a sanding block. The first coat of finish, what that does is it seals the wood, but it also raises the grain in some cases. So I recommend that you do a sanding between coats with the 220 or 320 paper, depending on which one I give you. You do that sanding by hand. And I use a glue block to make sure that I do cover all of the surfaces and do it evenly. Very gently sand every surface as well. Do all the legs, do all the edges, the undersides, making sure you cover every surface. You can also give a feel to see if it's smoother, and if it's not smoother after you've sanded it, you might need to sand a little bit more vigorously. But make sure you've covered every surface, and you sand between, when you're sanding between coats, that you get every piece that's got polyurethane on it. I'd even do the underside as well, but that's an important way to prepare the first coat for the second coat of polyurethane. This is also a time where we've got a lot of questions about should I paint the inside or finish the inside. If you have created a long handled brush, you can get in there without making a mess of your sleeves or your arms. So I would recommend putting finish, at least one coat of finish or paint on the inside of the desk. If you can, it would be really terrific to be able to put a third coat on the top box of the desk. This is where someone's work surface, and that's going to get the most use. So if you've got the time and the energy, sand between the second and third coats and apply a third coat to this top box. I want to thank you so much for participating in this Deskmates project. It really has made a difference in the lives of so many kids who now have a home base to study at, a place to organize themselves, and to be able to study in a more concentrated way. So your project has made, you can be assured, is making a direct impact on a young person's education and on their achievement as well. So thank you again. It's a blessing for me to have people like you participating in this project.